A man arrived at a peaceful welfare home in South Korea, hoping for a second chance in life. But behind the clean white walls and quiet smiles, something terrifying was hidden underground. People who entered this place never returned, and the truth about what happened in the basement was far worse than anyone could imagine. The bus stopped at the edge of a quiet road in the countryside of South Korea. The building ahead looked peaceful. White walls, blue roof, a wooden sign that read Harmony Welfare Home. Birds moved through the trees above the gate. The air smelled like wet grass and old paint. I stepped off the bus with my small bag in my hand. A man in a gray uniform opened the metal gate. His smile felt stiff. Too stiff. Inside the yard, several people stood in a line. Their heads were lowered. No one spoke. The silence felt heavy against my ears. A woman with a clipboard guided me into the main building. The hallway smelled of bleach and rust. The lights above flickered slowly. A buzzing sound crawled through the ceiling. Somewhere far away, a door slammed. The woman stopped walking and looked at me. Her eyes felt empty. "Welcome to Harmony Welfare Home," she said. Her voice sounded flat, like a machine reading a sentence. She handed me a thin blanket and a gray uniform. New residents must follow strict rules. The word residence felt strange. I expected kindness here. That was what the letter promised. A safe place. Food. Work. A new start. The woman opened another door. Cold air rushed into my face. The room beyond was large and dim. Metal beds lined the walls. Thin bodies lay on them. Some stared at the ceiling. Some stared at nothing. One man slowly turned his head toward me. His eyes were wide. Fear lived inside them, deep and silent. A whistle screamed down the hallway. Instant movement. The people on the beds jumped up. They stood in straight lines beside the walls. A guard entered the room. Heavy boots. Hard face. A wooden baton in his hand. He walked slowly between the rows. The air grew tight around my chest. A young boy near the corner trembled. His hands shook. The guard noticed. The baton lifted. The crack of wood against bone echoed through the room. The boy fell to the floor. No one moved. No one spoke. The guard looked around with calm eyes. As long as rules are followed, there will be peace here. Peace. The word felt wrong. Very wrong. The woman beside me pushed me forward. My feet moved across the cold floor. Every step echoed too loudly. The guard stopped in front of me. His eyes scanned my face slowly. "You are new." I nodded. He leaned closer. His breath smelled like bitter tea and smoke. "You will learn quickly." The guard turned and walked away. The woman pulled me back into the hallway. My heart beat harder with every step. Then I heard something strange. A faint sound, like someone dragging chains across concrete. It came from below the floor. I stopped walking. The woman grabbed my arm tightly. "Do not stop." Her nails pressed into my skin. The sound came again. Metal scraping. A weak cry. My stomach twisted. "There are basements here?" I asked. Her face turned pale. She said nothing. We continued down the hallway. At the end stood a thick steel door. 2 guards waited beside it. The woman handed them a paper. They opened the door slowly. Cold air crawled out of the darkness below. The smell followed. Rotting food. Wet concrete. Old blood. My throat tightened. A dim staircase descended into the ground. Shadows moved along the walls. One of the guards pushed me forward. My foot touched the first step. Then the second. The cries became louder. Soft. Broken. Human. At the bottom of the stairs, the room opened into a wide underground hall. Cages lined the walls. Inside them sat people. Dozens of them. Thin arms wrapped around their knees. Bruises covered their skin. Some stared at me with hollow eyes. One woman reached through the bars. Her fingers shook. "Help us," she whispered. A guard struck the cage with his baton. The metal rang through the hall. The woman quickly pulled her hand back. My chest felt tight. This place was not a welfare home. This place was a prison. No. Worse than a prison. A man stood chained to a pipe near the center of the hall. A bucket rested beside his feet. His head hung forward. Then slowly, He lifted his face. His eyes met mine. Recognition flashed across his expression. A quiet breath escaped his mouth. "You should run," he whispered. The guard beside me laughed softly. "There is no running here." The heavy door above slammed shut. Darkness swallowed the stairway. The sound echoed through the underground hall as another cage door opened and footsteps moved closer toward me. The bus stopped at the edge of a narrow countryside road in South Korea. The engine fell silent. The sudden quiet felt strange after hours of travel. Ahead stood a building surrounded by tall pine trees, white walls, blue roof tiles. A wooden sign near the gate read Harmony Welfare Home. The place looked peaceful, too peaceful. Wind moved slowly through the branches above. The air carried the smell of wet soil and old wood. I stepped down from the bus, with my small bag in my hand. Gravel cracked under my shoes. The driver closed the door without a word. The bus turned and disappeared down the road. I stood alone in front of the gate. A tall man in a gray uniform unlocked the metal bars. The gate groaned as it opened. His smile appeared slow and thin. His eyes studied me for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. I walked through the gate. The yard stretched wide and empty. Several people stood in a straight line near the main entrance. Their bodies looked thin beneath identical gray uniforms. Their heads remained lowered. No one spoke. The silence felt unnatural. A woman holding a clipboard approached me. Her shoes tapped sharply against the stone path. Her face held no warmth. "Welcome to Harmony Welfare Home," she said. Her voice sounded flat, like a message repeated too many times. She handed me folded clothing, a gray uniform, a thin blanket. "You will follow all rules," she said. The word rules lingered in the air. I expected kindness here. The letter promised safety, food, work, a chance to rebuild life. Instead, the air felt heavy with something unspoken. The woman turned and walked toward the building. I followed her inside. The hallway smelled of bleach and damp walls. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. A low buzzing sound filled the ceiling. Doors lined both sides of the corridor. Each door had a small metal number. No windows. No voices. Then a distant sound echoed somewhere deeper in the building. A sudden shout. Then silence again. The woman stopped at a door and pushed it open. Cold air spilled into the hallway. Inside the room stood rows of metal beds. Thin mattresses sagged in the middle. Several people sat on them quietly. Their faces looked tired. Their eyes looked hollow. One man slowly raised his head as I entered. Fear lived inside his stare, deep and silent. A whistle screamed somewhere down the corridor. The sound cut through the air like a blade. Instant movement followed. Everyone in the room jumped to their feet. They formed straight lines beside the beds. A guard entered seconds later. Heavy boots struck the floor. His baton rested against his shoulder. He walked slowly between the rows. The room felt smaller with each step he took. A young boy near the wall trembled slightly. His fingers shook at his sides. The guard noticed. The baton lifted into the air. The crack of wood against bone echoed sharply. The boy collapsed to the floor. No one moved. No one spoke. The guard looked around calmly. "As long as rules are followed, there will be peace," he said. Peace. The word felt twisted. The woman beside me pushed my shoulder. "Follow me." We returned to the hallway. My heart beat faster with every step. The building felt colder now. As we walked deeper inside, another sound reached my ears. Soft at first, faint and distant, metal scraping against concrete. Then a weak cry. I slowed my steps. The sound came from below the floor. I stopped walking. "There is something under the building," I said quietly. The woman gripped my arm tightly. Her nails pressed into my skin. "You keep walking." Her voice carried tension now. But the sound came again. Chains dragging slowly across stone. My stomach twisted. At the end of the hallway stood a thick steel door. 2 guards waited beside it. Their eyes watched every movement. The woman handed them a sheet of paper. They unlocked the door. Cold air rushed out from the darkness below. The smell followed immediately. Rotting food, damp concrete, old blood. A narrow staircase descended into the ground. A dim bulb flickered far below. One guard shoved me forward. My foot touched the first step. Then another. The cries grew louder as I descended. Broken voices echoed through the stairwell. Human voices. When my feet reached the bottom, the space opened into a wide underground hall. My breath stopped. Metal cages lined the walls from one end to the other. Inside them sat people. Dozens of them. Thin arms wrapped around shaking bodies. Bruises covered their skin. Some stared at the floor. Some stared at the darkness. One woman crawled toward the bars as she saw me. Her fingers slipped through the metal. They trembled badly. "Help us," she whispered. A guard struck the cage with his baton. The metal rang loudly. She pulled her hand back quickly. Fear filled her eyes. My chest tightened painfully. This place was not a welfare home. This place was a prison hidden beneath kindness. A man stood chained to a rusted pipe near the center of the hall. A bucket rested beside his bare feet. His head hung forward. Then slowly, he lifted his face. His eyes locked onto mine. Recognition flashed across his expression. A quiet breath escaped his lips. "You should run," he whispered weakly. One guard beside me laughed softly. "There is no running here." The heavy door above slammed shut. The echo rolled through the underground hall. Darkness swallowed the stairway. Footsteps moved behind me. A cage door creaked open somewhere in the shadows. Cold hands grabbed my arms from behind. Iron cuffs snapped around my wrists. Across the hall, another prisoner suddenly began screaming. Not in fear. In warning. Because at the far end of the basement, a second door slowly opened. Bright white light spilled across the concrete floor. And shapes moved inside that light. Tall shapes carrying metal tools. The chained man near the pipe closed his eyes as the footsteps approached. Then he whispered something under his breath while the guards dragged me toward the light. The bus stopped beside a narrow countryside road in South Korea. The engine faded into silence. Wind moved gently through tall pine trees surrounding the area. Ahead stood a large building behind a metal gate. White walls. Blue roof tiles. A wooden sign hung beside the entrance. The words read Harmony Welfare Home. The place looked peaceful from a distance. Quiet. Orderly. Safe. I stepped down from the bus with a small bag in my hand. The gravel road crunched under my shoes. The bus driver closed the door and drove away without a word. Soon the sound of the engine disappeared. Only wind remained. A tall man in a gray uniform opened the metal gate slowly. The gate groaned loudly as it moved. His smile appeared thin and forced. His eyes studied my face carefully. Then he nodded toward the yard. I walked inside. The yard felt larger than expected. Several people stood near the main entrance. They wore identical gray uniforms. Their heads were lowered. Their shoulders looked tense. No one spoke. Not even a whisper moved through the air. A woman carrying a clipboard approached me. Her steps were quick and sharp. Her expression remained cold and distant. "Welcome to Harmony Welfare Home," she said. Her voice sounded flat and rehearsed. She handed me folded clothing. A gray uniform. A thin blanket. "You will follow all rules here," she said. The word rules hung heavily in the air. I expected something different. The letter that invited me here promised help. Food. Shelter. Work. A place to begin again. Instead, the atmosphere felt tight and uneasy. The woman turned and walked toward the building entrance. I followed her through the doors. The hallway smelled of bleach and damp walls. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. A low buzzing sound filled the ceiling. The corridor stretched long and narrow. Metal doors lined both sides. Each door had a number but no window. The building felt strangely quiet. Then a sudden sound echoed far away. A sharp shout, followed by something heavy striking the floor. The woman continued walking as if nothing happened. We reached a room filled with metal beds. Thin mattresses sagged across their frames. Several people sat quietly on the beds. Their faces looked pale and tired. Their eyes carried deep exhaustion. One man slowly raised his head as I entered. Fear filled his stare. Deep and silent fear. A whistle suddenly screamed through the hallway. The sound pierced the air. Everyone in the room jumped up instantly. They stood beside the beds in straight lines. A guard entered moments later. His heavy boots struck the floor with slow authority. A wooden baton rested in his hand. He walked between the rows of people. The room grew colder with each step. A young boy near the corner trembled slightly. His hands shook against his sides. The guard stopped in front of him. The baton lifted into the air. The crack echoed sharply through the room. The boy fell hard onto the floor. No one moved.
No one made a sound.
The guard looked around calmly. As long as rules are followed, there will be peace, he said.
Peace.
The words sounded twisted inside this room. The woman pushed my shoulder. Follow me. We returned to the hallway. My chest felt tight. Every step echoed loudly in my ears. As we walked deeper into the building, I heard something strange. A faint scraping sound. Metal dragging slowly across concrete. Then a weak cry. The sound came from below the floor. I stopped walking. There are people under the building, I said quietly. The woman grabbed my arm firmly. Her fingers dug into my skin. You keep walking, she said. But the sound came again. Chain scraping. A muffled voice crying out in pain. My stomach twisted. At the end of the corridor stood a heavy steel door. 2 guards waited beside it. Their eyes watched me carefully. The woman handed them a sheet of paper. One guard unlocked the door. The metal lock clicked loudly. When the door opened, cold air rushed out. A terrible smell followed. Rotting food. Wet concrete. Something darker beneath it. A narrow staircase led down into darkness. A weak bulb flickered somewhere below. A guard pushed me forward. My foot touched the first step. Then the next. With every step the cries became clearer. Broken voices echoed through the stairwell. Human voices. When I reached the bottom, the space opened into a massive underground hall. My breath stopped. Metal cages filled the room from wall to wall. Inside them sat people.
Dozens of them.
Thin bodies curled against the bars. Bruises covered their arms and faces. Some stared at the floor without moving. Some stared at me with hollow eyes. One woman crawled toward the bars as she saw me. Her fingers slipped through the metal. They trembled violently. Help us, she whispered weakly. A guard struck the cage with his baton. The metal rang loudly through the hall. The woman pulled her hand back in fear. My heart pounded against my ribs. This place was not a welfare home. This place was something else entirely. A man stood chained to a rusted pipe near the center of the hall. A bucket rested beside his feet. His head hung forward. Slowly, he lifted his face. His eyes met mine. Recognition flashed across his expression. You should run, he whispered. One guard laughed quietly. There is no running here. The heavy door above slammed shut. Darkness swallowed the stairway. 2 guards grabbed my arms from behind. Cold metal cuffs snapped around my wrists. Across the hall, another prisoner began shouting. Not in panic. In warning. Because at the far end of the basement, another door slowly opened. Bright white light spilled across the floor. Shadows moved inside the light. Tall figures stepped out one by one. They carried metal tools. Cold tools that reflected the light. The chained man near the pipe closed his eyes slowly. His voice trembled as he spoke again. They test people down here. The guards dragged me toward the bright room. As I passed the cages, dozens of silent faces watched. Fear filled every pair of eyes. Then one prisoner suddenly spoke from the darkness of a corner cage. His voice sounded weak but urgent. You came on the bus today, he said. I turned my head toward him. His face looked pale beneath the dim lights. His lips trembled as he spoke again. The buses never bring help, he whispered. They only bring more bodies. The guards dragged me across the cold concrete floor. The bright white light from the open room grew stronger with every step. It burned my eyes. Behind me, the basement remained filled with silent cages and hollow faces. The chained man near the pipe lifted his head one last time. His eyes followed me as I was pulled away. He looked as if he already knew what waited inside that room. The guards pushed me through the doorway. The light swallowed everything behind me. Inside stood a large chamber with smooth white walls. Metal tables filled the center of the room. Bright lamps hung above them. Their glow reflected off steel instruments arranged in careful rows.
Knives.
Clamps. Strange machines that hummed quietly. The air smelled sharp and chemical. Several men in clean coats turned toward me. Their faces looked calm. Too calm. One of them stepped forward slowly. His glasses reflected the bright light. "You are the newest arrival," he said. His voice sounded gentle, almost polite, but his eyes carried no warmth. A guard forced me into a metal chair. Cold restraints closed around my arms and legs. The metal pressed against my skin. The man with glasses studied a paper in his hand. "You came here hoping for work and shelter," he said softly. I felt my heart pounding hard against my ribs. He placed the paper down on a nearby table. "You arrived at the perfect time," he continued. Behind him, another man adjusted one of the machines. Its quiet humming grew louder. A sharp needle glinted under the light. I looked around the room. No windows. No exits except the door behind the guards. Through that doorway, I could still see part of the dark basement hall. Cages. Silent prisoners, watching. The man with glasses stepped closer to me. "This facility helps society remove burdens," he explained calmly. "People forgotten by the world become useful again here." His hand lifted a small syringe from the tray. The liquid inside it looked dark and thick. My chest tightened as he approached. Then suddenly something unexpected happened. A loud crash echoed from the basement outside. Metal bars rattled violently. Shouts erupted in the darkness. The guards turned their heads toward the noise. Another crash followed. Then another. The prisoners were hitting the cages. All at once. Dozens of metal bars shaking against concrete walls. The basement filled with thunder. A guard rushed toward the doorway to look. The chained man near the pipe had fallen against a stack of metal buckets. The noise spread through the hall like a signal. More prisoners joined the chaos. Cages shook. Voices shouted. The sound became deafening. The guards cursed loudly. One of them stepped away from me to restore order. The moment felt small.
Brief.
But real. I twisted my wrists hard against the restraints. The metal bit into my skin. Pain shot through my arms. The man with glasses frowned at the sudden disturbance. Another crash echoed from the hallway. One cage door had broken loose. A prisoner stumbled into the corridor. The guards rushed out of the room to stop him. For a few seconds, the white chamber stood nearly empty. The machines continued humming quietly. My breathing grew fast and desperate. I pulled again against the restraints. The bolt on my right wrist loosened slightly. The metal creaked. Behind me, the basement chaos grew louder.
More shouting.
Running footsteps. Someone screamed in pain. Someone else shouted directions. The bolt loosened further. My wrist slipped free at last. Blood ran down my hand where the metal had cut into my skin. I quickly freed the other restraint. The chair scraped loudly as I stood. The open doorway revealed confusion outside. Guards pushed prisoners back toward the cages. But the hall no longer looked controlled. The chained man near the pipe saw me standing. For the first time, his eyes widened with surprise. Then slowly, he nodded toward the stairway. The narrow staircase leading up still stood open. No guard watched it now. The opportunity felt fragile. But it existed. I stepped carefully across the bright room. The instruments on the table reflected the light as I passed them. For a moment, I looked back at the machines. At the chairs. At the silent tools waiting for the next victim. Then I ran. My feet hit the concrete floor as I crossed the basement hall. The prisoners saw me moving toward the stairs. Some shouted encouragement. Some simply watched in stunned silence. The chained man whispered something as I passed him. His voice carried only one word. Remember. I reached the staircase and climbed quickly. Each step felt heavy and endless. My lungs burned. My legs trembled. At the top of the stairs, the steel door stood half open. Cold night air slipped through the gap. I pushed the door wider and stepped outside. The forest surrounded the building in darkness. Wind moved through the trees again.
Just as it had earlier that day.
But now the peaceful building behind me felt like a mask. A lie hiding something terrible beneath it. Far below, faint echoes of shouting still rose from the basement. I stood in the yard breathing hard. The sign beside the gate still read Harmony Welfare Home. The same quiet words that welcomed me hours earlier. But now I understood the truth hidden behind them. And as I walked toward the dark road beyond the gate, one thought remained clear in my mind. The world outside still believed this place helped people. Someone had to reveal what truly waited beneath those peaceful walls.